Coast to coast, border to border, and around the world, it's time for The Bill Alexander Show. The Bill Alexander Show is a guest-driven program where the topics are diverse and entertaining. Laugh and learn while you listen to one of the best hours of online radio. Now, here's your host, Bill Alexander.
Hi, everyone. Yours truly, William Eric Alexander. All my friends call me Bill, and welcome to this edition of the Bill Alexander Show. I think I have a real treat for you because I think you've heard this man's voice before. Well, I know you have. It's just that I don't think you know who it is because he does many voices, and I don't know if you actually know his voice. He is the voice of Colonel Sanders on the TV commercials for KFC. He has been voices of Robin Williams. He has done, now he's doing Phil Donahue, which I have a lot of questions about that one. And he's been in quite a few movies, such as Apollo 13 and things like that with Ron Howard. And best of all, his mother is Marion Ross, who was Mrs. Cunningham on Happy Days. Jim Meskimen, how are you doing today, sir?
Good, Bill. Thanks so much. Yeah, probably the best part of my career is that I am the son of Marion Ross of Happy Days.
Which is actually, that probably have quite a few stories about that too.
Sure. Well, it was a long period of my life and my formative years growing up. That show was on from, I was about 12, I think, when it started, and ran for 11 more years after that. So it was a long period for me, a big formative period for my mom, and she became an icon, and things changed.
So I go through your list of the things that you have done. Like I said, you're Colonel Sanders.
That's
you were
right.
also
That's right on your radio and your TV for people that don't believe it. This is the voice of Colonel Sanders. Yeah.
You were also George Washington in a Geico commercial crossing the Delaware Turnpike, which I think is a very unique commercial in itself.
Yeah.
You've done President George W. Bush.
That's right.
You've done Sir Patrick Stewart, Christopher
Yes.
Walken, which I think your Christopher Walken is amazing.
Thank you.
Robin Williams, Morgan Freeman, and you're now doing Phil Donahue.
Well,
I cannot imagine a big calling for Phil Donahue.
No, and it was probably a once in a lifetime thing, but it's for a show called Welcome to Chippendales, which is a mini series or a limited series about the Chippendales dancers and their rise to prominence. And a big part of it was that they were introduced to America on the Phil Donahue show, which I didn't remember, in the early 90s. So I auditioned and won the role of Phil Donahue. And this is, to me, what Phil Donahue sounded like was kind of like, just a normal guy, presentational, a good announcer type guy. And I studied a lot of stuff for the audition and watched him on YouTube quite a bit. And then on the day I went and shot my episode. It'll be on December 13th, that particular one of Welcome to Chippendales,
which will be next week. So that's actually really nice. I went back and I did a Google search of that Phil Donahue episode with the Chippendales, and they were dancing on stage and everything else. Did you watch that episode, or did you just try to get the feel of Donahue and let them do their own thing?
I didn't watch that particular episode, and I think our script was a little bit different. But I just researched Phil and got, did my very best impression of him, basically. And then on the day they gave me an extra white hairpiece and a little bit of paunch and the suit and the glasses, and it was great going into we were using a local community college as the one of their rooms, auditoriums, as the set of Phil Donahue. And they had, of course, filled the room with what they call atmosphere people or extras, dressed in the period clothes of the early 90s. And with their hair, all these women, mostly women, their hair and clothes like 1991. And I tell you, it was like stepping back in time. You don't think there's that much of a difference, but boy, there is a pretty big difference in the fashions
sure there was.
And the hair. The women had their hair all pulled over on one side. It's massive shoulder pads, and even the fabrics, everything was just like, wow, the makeup. It was great to see.
That has to be interesting, being able to step back in time, and you've done that in,
Yes.
like they said, the movie Apollo 13,
Yes.
and also in the movie Frost Nixon. You
Right.
went back to the early 1970s.
Yeah.
And how old were you in that time frame, growing up?
Rather personal question, but I was, younger.
1971 is Apollo 13, I believe.
Yes.
So I was like high school, and then 1977 was Frost Nixon. So a little bit after that, I was in my 20s, or maybe late teens. Yeah. So yeah, it's fun to go back, and especially with Apollo 13, where the production recreated mission control of that time period, down to the last nail head and the drop ceiling and everything. I mean, you'd walk into that soundstage and you did not know you were in a soundstage. There was not like vast hangings with lights and things to kind of make it look like you were in a theater. It was nothing like that. It looked like the actual building because of the way they shot. And Frost Nixon, we went mostly. We worked in homes because the action of that takes place in a home, in a private home. So yeah, you do feel like you're going back in time a little bit because all the objects of that time are there. I remember there was a kitchen set that was part of, because they redid the whole interior of the house, the dining room and all the spaces in that home. And, they put in different old-timey kitchen utensils, can openers and things. And, they're very different looking than kitchens of today. I'll say that.
So you were in the teens when you did these did you remember any of that history, or was a lot of that news to you at the time? Because I doubt you knew anything about the Frost Nixon, but the space program you probably knew a little bit about when you were 13 years old.
Yeah, but only very that particular one. And part of the story of Apollo 13 that they mention in the movie, that's a plot point, is that America is so distracted by other events going on at that time that there's not tremendous viewership or interest in Apollo 13, which was going to be another moon landing. And it's just kind of, people sort of don't pay a lot of attention to it. So I do not remember it really from that time period. I was 12 or 13. I had lots of other things to think about, and none of them very productive. But when I was in my 30s and in the movie Apollo 13, I was able to study up on it a lot. And I was fascinated by the science of it, and fascinated, just as Ron and Tom Hanks were, by just what was achieved and what was done by whom, because they were all a lot of feisty young people that pulled it off.
So the movies that you have been in, do you have a favorite role or a favorite film that you've been in?
Yeah, I usually consider that Apollo 13 is my favorite because I learned so much, and it's such a great film, and it's such a great story. And I think Ron Howard did a fantastic job of presenting it and really husbanding this story so that people really get it. And it's an unusual film because it is very thrilling and suspenseful. But even if you know the ending, your heart starts to pound at the end, and you start to worry for those people. And as I also have noticed many times, is that mostly in films today, action films or thrillers, the enemy or the antagonist of the film is some maniac or some despot, and in this film it's the physical universe. It's the challenge of space and the vacuum of being outside Earth's atmosphere. That's the villain, and it's about how human beings actually did confront and face up to that challenge. So that makes it kind of unique. There's not a whole lot of stories like that.
Should I ask you, who is your favorite director?
Well, I think you know the answer. I mean, I've worked with some great ones, but Ron Howard gets singular, and he gets better and better. I don't know if you saw 13 Lives, his latest film, which is,
I have not seen it yet.
It's about humanity against the elements. It's another one like Apollo 13, and he tells it brilliantly. And it was so stressful to watch it. There's so much suspense. And even though I did know the outcome, I knew the outcome of this movie, I was sitting on the couch with my wife. I'm like, I am just shivering with anticipation. I don't know if I can even watch this movie. And indeed, we watched it over a couple of nights because it was just like, oh my God, I can't take it.
Right.
I can't take it anymore. I have to sleep tonight.
So,
amazing.
Knowing Ron Howard in his Happy Days period,
Right.
and you probably being on the set at the time,
Mhm.
did you ever see this creativity come out of him then? Did you know he was going to be a great director, or is it just something that just developed over time?
Well, I knew he was going to be a director because he spoke of it often, and he was working on screenplays, and I read some of his early screenplays. And indeed, I actually worked for him on weekends for his first unfinished feature that he was doing on his own money in his own time, which was a 16 millimeter film that we never quite finished, because he struck a nice deal with Roger Corman, probably a nicer deal for Roger Corman than for Ron. But if Ron starred in Eat My Dust, a cheap car crash movie, then Roger Corman would allow him to direct another cheap car crash movie, which he wrote with his father, Rance Howard. So then he dropped the project that he was working on and went over and did that. And now I knew he would be a director. I did not know that he would become one of the foremost directors in the world. I should have assumed that, but I have to say the writing wasn't on the wall for me. Not that I knew, even what directing was about at that time. But it's hard to predict when somebody's going to just move in time into a place of such prominence. I also didn't realize my mom would become America's mom, and so apparently, there's a lot of lack of imagination on my part.
So with Ron Howard, that vignette that you did, that movie that's unfinished, has there ever been talk about redoing it and finishing it, or is it actually stuck on a shelf?
No, he did sell the project. So he didn't finish the film we were working on. So that's lying in a can somewhere or in the garbage somewhere. But he did take the project and sell it, and they made it as a TV movie, and another person directed it. So it did survive in some way.
What was the movie?
I've never seen it. What did they wind up being called? I think it was called Leo and Laurie, and it starred Don Most and Linda Pearl, I believe,
who was both on Happy Days.
Yeah, Don Most played Ralph, and Linda also guest starred on Happy Days.
So your mother, Marion Ross, Mrs. Cunningham, became America's mom, and a lot of people that don't remember Happy Days were introduced to your mother on the 70s show.
Yes.
And that had to be really interesting for her to go from a clean-cut atmosphere of the 1950s and then go into the 70s where they're talking about sex and drugs and everything very open on the set. Did she have an issue with that, or was it she just an actress and she was doing what she needed to do?
She's a lifelong actress, my mom, and she just loves characters and she loves people. So I imagine she attacked it with the same kind of gusto that she attacked the Marion Cunningham assignment. And she's done Eugene O'Neill plays, and she's done very difficult dramas, Tennessee Williams stuff. So she's a really strong actress, and I don't think anything throws her.
So what got you into doing impressions?
Oh, it just was an interest of mine. As a kid, doing voices, my mom demonstrated to me that it was fun to do accents and to imitate people, and it was perfectly okay. It was kind of coin of the realm around my house to do voices and imitate people. It was like no big deal. Nobody shut you down for doing it, and and it was fun. You could have a laugh. And so I've always been interested in that channel of communication, what you can hear, what you can listen to. I used to listen to talk radio when I was a kid all the time. I love to hear people's voices. You get a lot of information about people just from their voice. Are they tired? Are they well educated? What part of the world are they from? Are they lactose intolerant? You can tell all kinds of things. And then they express themselves in different ways. They have funny expressions and sayings, and humanity is infinitely fascinating. And AI notwithstanding. So I like to imitate people, and as a kid, I did it for fun, and also as a little bit of a game. Can you sound like this person? Then when my voice changed, I used it as a way of entertaining my friends in high school and making them laugh, and then it was like a skill that I had developed that I really didn't have any special designs for. I didn't have any kind of goal, although I admired Rich Little and other people of the time period. I didn't see myself in a powder blue tuxedo out in front of some Vegas crowd one day. I just didn't picture myself that way. Subsequently, in recent years, I have done something like that, but I didn't plan to do it. It was just one of these skills that when I at last was a young man in New York City trying to get started in show business, I found, I'm just a little better than most of my actor friends at doing this. And that opened up some doors for me very early on, so that I could work and do recordings and radio commercials and promos and things that involved impressions. And then, I would just kind of haul it out every now and then, because I realized, boy, for better or for worse, audiences get a big kick out of, if you just suddenly become Patrick Stewart, for example, and you just drop your other personality entirely and become a different person. There's something very amusing about it, which is something that, of course, Robin Williams used to great effect all the time. He would change on a dime, and something marvelous about it. I think it demonstrates something about the human spirit too, how expansive it can be and how ever-changing. So then I began to really kind of put it to work.
So when you got the job for KFC as Colonel Sanders, because at one time they were actually hiring actors to portray him.
Yeah.
They had, I guess it was Jason Alexander. There were other ones like that were doing it at the time. And then all of a sudden they got rid of the Colonel and they had you come in as the voice, and you're looking at it as third person where you never see the Colonel.
Right. You sometimes see his hands or the bucket. Or
right.
Something. Yeah.
So that is, to me, that's a very clever idea to do that, because he's still in the program or in the commercial, but you don't know who he is. Do people recognize you as the Colonel now, or do you have to go into the voice for them to get it?
Oh yeah, no one does. No. It would take an incredible leap of imagination, I think, to just suddenly pluck that out of the air. No, I have to.
No pun intended, right?
Yeah, very good. I said pluck. Yeah.
So how did you come up with the Colonel's voice?
Well, I didn't. I mean, I just listened to the Colonel. When I grew up, the Colonel still did his own advertising.
Right.
I probably listened to 100 hours of Colonel commercials in my lifetime. So for me, it was like,
I recognize his voice very well. And there's a certain quality that it has, which is not Southern exactly. It's more because he's from Indiana. So he has a slightly different accent than a real Kentucky fried Colonel, or a Kentucky Colonel, rather. He shouldn't be fried at all. I don't recommend you frying a Colonel. So that voice is so in my mind, I could never shake it anyway. So, and I have enough control over my own voice where I can replicate it pretty well.
Okay.
And it's so much fun to do. I really enjoy being Colonel Sanders. He was a really unique kind of American, an entrepreneur, a man of faith, a man of hard work, who represented the same kind of gumption that my mom, Marion Ross, represents to me. Of like, pull yourself up. My mom was a child of the Depression. She was born in the late 20s. And so the philosophy of that time was just, get off your butt and do it. Nobody's going to do it for you. And I think the Colonel's the same way. So they're kind of like two peas in a pod. It's interesting. And I respect that. I respect that viewpoint, make it happen. Even my mom, she says, you can be anything, but you have to make it happen.
Right. Now, there's one thing I did not realize is that you were one of the voices in the original Thundercats.
No, that's not true.
Oh, not true.
No, I was a character designer.
Oh, okay.
Thundercats as a visual artist, as a cartoonist.
So you are a cartoonist, you're an impressionist, you're a voiceover artist, and you're an actor.
but not all at the same time. But not all at the same time.
Hey, if you could do it at the same time, that'd be a neat Vegas act, to be honest with you.
It would be pretty amazing. And ride a unicycle. Yeah. No, I supported my early acting career. I supported in New York by being a cartoonist illustrator, and I worked for Rankin Bass, and I designed the characters and vehicles and weapons for the very first Thundercats show.
So what training or skills did you have to do that? Did you go to school to do that? Or did they say, here, we want to teach you how to do it? How did that work?
Oh, no. I knew how to do it when I got there. I'd never designed for television before, but I had designed cartoon characters all my life. I'm a self-taught cartoonist.
Okay.
I used to read Mad Magazine, and I just loved to draw. I'd spend hours and hours drawing, and I learned to draw on my own. And then when I was a bit older and in school, I would take life drawing classes. And I thought that was probably going to be my career. So I worked very hard at it. I worked for Hanna-Barbera Studios too, when I was about 17 or 18. And then I got this job for Rankin Bass, but I also received some very formal art training in college, and I lived in Spain, and I studied realist oil painting with a Spanish master, and lived in Spain for a couple of years, just focusing on that. So I did get some hard training there. But at the end of the day, to make a very long story quite short, I decided that I needed a more social art form for my own happiness and sanity. And so that's why I got into acting, because I also loved acting. And I realized that acting is something that you do with other people, and painting is something that you do pretty much alone all the time.
Right.
So and at that time of my life, I was like, I do not need to be alone this much. It's just too tough.
So prior to COVID, you were doing stage shows, correct? You were going out and entertaining.
Yeah.
Since COVID, are you planning on doing that again, or are you just going to stick with online stuff?
No, I'd love to go out again. And I have done some. I just did some charity shows this last weekend. And I'd love to do more. It's great to get in front of an audience. It really is lovely. Right now, apparently we're having some sort of uptick and something, so people are a little edgy. But, I think it's going to change. I think it has to change, because we are a social species. And all my life, people have done shows, and the show must go on. You have the flu, you still go on. I've done plenty of shows, in my time where I didn't feel so great, or the audience was hacking and wheezing. So it's planet Earth. What are we going to say? So I look forward to doing more live shows, but I will also, I've got a tremendous amount going on online. I've got my YouTube channel with over 3,500 little videos. I've got my TikTok has been blowing up lately. I've got a couple of them that have really, really taken off of my impressions videos, and I'm continuing to feed that beast. So, and Instagram and all the rest of them. So, I enjoy it. It's a great way to hit a world audience, a global audience with what I do. And it keeps me creative. It keeps me feeling fulfilled, and it keeps challenging.
When you started acting, impersonating, voiceover stuff, like, did you ever think you had to market yourself the way you do now to stay relevant in the people's mind? Because like you said, the TikTok, the YouTube, and all that, 30 years ago, you didn't have that.
No, I did a lot of marketing, but I did it the hard way. I did it the old way. I did it with envelopes and paper and stamps, and sending out cassettes and VHS tapes. And I've always been a person who was not averse to self-promotion. And I don't mean it in a negative way. I think you have to, particularly if you're a one-man band, as I have been a lot of times in my life. And a lot of our actors are, when they start out, you have to make your peace with letting people know what you do well, and kind of putting it in their face again and again. This is what all marketers do for every kind of product in the world, whether it's Coca-Cola or whistles,
right?
Dog whistles. We have to constantly be reminding people that we exist and that there is a need for them. So I've been doing it a long time, and now I'm doing it much cheaper because, of course, all this social media stuff doesn't cost you anything but your time, and it's a way to keep relevant. But it is kind of mind-boggling to take your point, kind of mind-boggling the amount of content that a person has to create, which I guess is why people are kind of meandering over to see how AI will help them and to create things. But I think we lose something when we're not actually creating it ourselves, and we're not come from a live human being. I think there's a little factor there that's missing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I really do. What other? I know you have something coming up on Apple TV here real soon.
Yes,
it's going to be released.
Yes, and I cannot understand why it isn't released yet, but because we've been working on it since early this year, and it's called The Big Door Prize, and it's a very funny series that'll be on Apple TV, and it stars the wonderful Chris O'Dowd. If you know that Irish actor, he's a young actor, and he's just funny. He was in the IT Crowd, which is a show I've absolutely fallen in love with, and he's in our show too. He's the star of it, and a really charming guy. And it's a fun show about a very high-tech fortune-telling machine, like that Zoltar machine that landed in Big, where it purports to give a person their actual fortune and destiny. And It uses all this high-tech metrics and then spits out a little card that tells people what they really should be doing with their lives. And when it hits this small town of Deerfield, in the South, it really just breaks everything in the town, because people start abandoning what they were doing and changing their lives in very drastic ways. So it should be a very funny show. It's by the makers, one of the producers or one of the showrunners of Schitt's Creek, if you saw that show.
Okay.
And it stars some very talented actors.
Anything else coming up? I know you have the Welcome to the Chippendales, you have the Apple TVs, or anything else coming up in the next, say 3 or 4 months?
I did an episode of Young Sheldon that'll be on, just a little.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and there's an episode of Hunters, that Al Pacino Nazi hunting show. That's
yes.
One of these days they'll announce that, and it's funny. You can do there are projects that I've done that have not been released yet, and I did them years ago. There are some that I did last month that have already come and gone. I don't know what it all depends on, but whoever schedules things has the grand plan in mind, I'm sure. In the meantime, I just try to stay busy. I do audiobooks. I have an online course for people that are interested in marketing themselves and in growing their acting career, and that's at jimworkingactor.com. That's a series of videos and ebooks about what I do to keep busy, keep working, keep building a career. So there's that. And then I'm writing a new live show.
Oh, what's the live show going to, what are you going to be dealing with in the live show?
Well, it's going to be more autobiographical, and it's going to have a lot of impressions, and
okay.
It's still a morning, but I have some very fun ideas in mind. So hopefully it'll be very entertaining.
So how do you think COVID affected the acting industry, the stage performance, everything else? And do you ever think it's going to be back to where it was before?
I think it could return. I think it was devastating, obviously, but I have hopes that it will return. We went to New York, my wife and I, and saw The Music Man recently, last month.
Mm-hmm.
And audience full of people having a great time, stage actors on stage doing a great job, Hugh Jackman, Sutton Foster, outstanding show. It was as if COVID never existed. So
mm-hmm.
More power to things like that, say I.
Which is great, because I'm glad to hear that stuff's finally happening. Jim, before I let you go, is there anything else you want to talk about that you want to bring up that you're going to be doing, or promote your websites?
Yeah, I'm on, like I said, I'm on TikTok, Jim Meskimen, also on Instagram and YouTube at Jimpressions. And I love to meet people online. If you see my videos or comment on them, I usually respond. And we put up at least one video a day on my YouTube channel. I do these celebrity fortune cookies where I open up a fortune cookie and read it in a celebrity voice. I spin a wheel and get the celebrity. I've been doing that for about 4 years every day. And that's my own little show. And I think that in these, if I have any kind of message in these troubled times or these difficult, challenging, crazy times, it's people say, what can one do? And one thing I think is useful is that you can always try to set a good example. Whatever else is going on, you can try to set a good example for others. And sometimes that's just a better way of looking at it than trying to, navigate through these complexities. What would you do that would set a good example for someone else to do? So that's what I try to do.
And then my final question is, do you have a favorite impression that you do?
Well, lately I've really enjoyed being Patrick's marvelous character, and people seem to love him a lot. And, I just think the older I get, the more I feel like Patrick Stewart anyway. So why not, adopt this very courtly and polite manner as often as you can,
That is fantastic. Jim, thank you very much for joining me. I really enjoyed it. And the best of luck to everything that you have going on. And hopefully we can talk to you again in the future.
Bill, I'd be happy to talk to you anytime. Thanks so much.
Hey, a big thank you goes out to Jim Meskimen for joining me this evening. What a blast that was to talk to him about his career and projects he has coming up. For example, Welcome to the Chippendales that was just released on Hulu, and him playing Phil Donahue. And also, as he said, he'll be on Young Sheldon, and he'll be doing other things that you will recognize him in. And now that you heard him, you now know that he's Colonel Sanders in the Kentucky Fried Chicken commercials. So again, great to have Jim on the program. Hopefully to have him back sometime in the future to talk about other projects he's working on. And again, just great to have him on the show. And I'm really glad you were able to join us on this edition of the Bill Alexander Show. Guys, you have a great night, great day, great afternoon, whatever time you're watching or listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to The Bill Alexander Show. The Bill Alexander Show is a $1 Million Baby production. For more information, go to thebillalexandershow.com.